God will change your attitude in the situation. You may not like beans, but if you get hungry enough, y'all looking at me funny, God will change your attitude toward beans. And you'll find yourself loving that which you thought you would never eat. I'm so glad that God didn't change my circumstance, but God changed my attitude in the circumstance. And I learned how to love beans. You ought to look at your neighbor and say, you ought to learn how to love beans. Oh, yeah. God will change your circumstance. When you're down to your last dime, God will put food on your table. Reminds me that God is a provider. He's Jehovah Jireh. And brothers and sisters, there are some of you in here that have some stories that you need to be telling. You need to be telling your children some of those stories. That's why they act like they act, because they don't know what they need to know. Y'all looking at me funny in here. You need to tell your children that life was not a crystal stairway, but you kept on climbing anyway. That you kept struggling, you kept pushing, you kept believing that God had not brought you this far to leave you. You need to tell your children that we weren't always able to go out to Ruby Tuesday or Olive Garden or even Taco Bell. Y'all ain't gonna help me preach in here. They need to know about that big old tub of welfare peanut butter. Choosy moms choose Jif. My mom didn't have a choice. Y'all ain't gonna help me preach up in here today. Your children ought to know about that big block of cheese. Do I have some witnesses up in here today? Mama couldn't go to the deli and say, I'll have a pound of Land O'Lakes white cheese. She had Uncle Sam's big block of orange cheese that you had to pull out the hacksaw to cut. They need to know how you and your siblings shared underwear. Oh, I'm preaching to the wrong folk in here today. I used to have to hide my underwear because my brother Fred and John ain't here, so I can talk about them. They would come in and they would take y'all ain't gonna help me preach in here today. They need to know how you had to hide a cereal bowl because you only had 3 bowls but 5 kids. Y'all ain't gonna help me preach in here today. So if you wanted to be one of the first to get you some cornflakes, Cheerios, no Apple Jacks, no Fruit Loops, no Frosted Mini Wheat, they need to know that mama didn't have health insurance and you had to, I'm going to tell on Sister Sherman and Sister Swan, I hope y'all don't mind and still love me after the fact. Mama didn't have health insurance and see, I needed glasses from the time I was a child, and I had to get my eyes examined, and she didn't have health insurance, so I had to go to the eye doctor and pretend I was Aunt Maxine's son, Myron. Just so I could get fitted for some glasses. They need to know everything ain't always been hunky-dory. Everything ain't always been like it is. And now we got a generation of ungrateful kids because they don't know the story. And so, you ought to tell them about Christmas with stockings and getting nuts and candies and not iPods and new bikes and new cell phones and new sneakers and new jeans. Come on in here, somebody. If storytelling is redeeming, revealing, and rewarding, then we ought to tell the story. I believe the text provides us with some insight to this dilemma. Why is it that we don't tell the story? Why is it that the women would get the good news that Jesus had risen from the dead but was scared to tell the story? Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. There are three reasons, my brothers and sisters, why we don't tell the story. First of all, we look at our past. You see, Mary Magdalene had a past. How am I going to tell the story when folk know I used to be a call girl? And the devil will lock up some of your jaws because of what you used to be, and will prevent you from telling the good news of Jesus Christ because you're worried about what folk are going to say about you. But you ought not worry about what folks say about what you used to be. That ought to be your testimony. Yeah, that's the operative word. I used to be. Come on, somebody. I am no longer what I was because God delivered me out of what I was. And so what? You used to run numbers. So what? You used to sleep around. So what? You used to drink. So what? You used to do drugs. Baby, let me tell you, everybody talking about you got their little habits, got their little secrets, and if you open up their closet, you better get out the way for all the bones that's about to fall out of it. Y'all ain't gonna like me in here today. Some of us ain't got skeletons in our closet. We got whole graveyards. Woo! And so we don't tell the story because we're worried about our past. But the Bible said, and such were some of you. But you've been washed. But you've been sanctified. But you've been delivered. But you've been set free. You ought to tell the story of how God set you free. You ought to tell some of your running buddies, I don't run no more. The things I used to do, I don't do no more. The places I used to go, I don't go no more. The old desires I used to have, I don't have anymore. Is there one testimony in here of somebody who used to smoke, but now you don't know more? Is there somebody who used to drink, but now you don't know more? Is there somebody in here that was a big fat liar? You ain't got to stand up. But now you don't do that no more. Is there anybody in here who can say, I am a new creature? If you're a new creature, slap your neighbor high five and tell him, I'm brand new, baby. I'm brand new. I'm almost done, my brothers and sisters. First, we don't tell the story because our past locks our jaw. Second reason we don't tell the story is because of the problems that are in our own lives. How can I tell this story about Jesus? How can I tell this story about God being so good? How can I tell this story about what he is to me with all of the problems that I'm currently going through? Well, brothers and sisters, you have to understand that God is a problem solver. God is a heart regulator. He's a burden bearer. Amen. And I don't care how saved you get, how sanctified you are, how prayed up you are, you always gonna have problems in your life. Come on, somebody. It doesn't matter where you go, what station you have, what title you have, there's always going to be problems in your life. But I thank God that despite my problem, I know the problem solver. I know the one that I can give it to in the midnight hour. I know the one that's able to handle my situation. I know the one that owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. I know the one that nothing with him is impossible. Don't you ever let your problem or your current circumstance hinder you from telling the goodness of Jesus. I don't care if you just got an eviction letter. You ought to testify and tell somebody, he's still my shelter.